Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laiq Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. Episode 11, Metagrammar, the Immune System for Reality. The Prologue Story, Season 0. The Library that can write the world. Imagine you wake up inside a library so vast you cannot see its end. Not a metaphorical library, a literal one. Floors stacked above floors, corridors splitting like veins, staircases looping into arches, balconies suspended over silence. The air smells like paper, metal, and rain. You walk between shelves and realize something unnerving. The books are not about history. They are history. One shelf is every conversation ever spoken. One shelf is every fall of every leaf. One shelf is every star that ever collapsed. One shelf is every thought you've ever had but never said. And then you notice the most terrifying shelf of all: every possible rule that could govern reality. Not one rule, not your favorite rule, not the rules taught in schools, not Einstein's rules, not Newton's rule. All rules. Rules that make planets orbit. Rules that make planets explode. Rules where time flows forward. Rules where time folds into itself like cloth. Rules where motion is smooth. Rules where motion is jagged. Rules where energy behaves like a tidy ledger. Rules where energy doesn't even make sense. You keep walking, and you find a desk in the center of the hall. On it is an object so simple it feels like a joke: a pen. But beside it is a sign. This pen does not write on paper. This pen writes on phi. And suddenly you understand why this place exists. Because if reality is written in phi, then this library is the place where the writing rules live. And you are not here to read a story. You are here to learn the difference between a rule that is real and a rule that only looks real because you are tired, biased, rushed, fooled, or desperate for closure. This is the beginning of episode 11. This is where we build the immune system for truth. The most dangerous gift. You sit, you pick up the pen. It's warmer than you expect. Not like a tool, like something alive. The moment you touch it, the library changes. The silence thickens. A soft vibration runs through the shelves, like the whole building is listening. A voice speaks, not from a mouth, from the air. This pen can write any rule, but not every rule is lawful. Not every rule deserves to exist. And if you write the wrong one, you will not merely be wrong. you will build a world that collapses while still appearing to work. You don't understand at first. You say, if a rule works, isn't that enough? The voice answers gently, no. A rule can work for the wrong reason. It can work only in a narrow window. It can work because your instrument lied to you. It can work because you accidentally trained it on the very data you used to test it. It can work because you smuggled it in through your definitions. It can work because you mistook correlation for causation. It can work because you called a convention a law. Then the voice says the sentence that becomes the heartbeat of episode 11. If the firewall fails, do not believe harder. Tighten the license. This is the first law of metagrammar, not a law of the universe, a law of how we earn the right to speak about the universe. The three glasses. A librarian appears beside you, not a person, a presence, a function, a guardian of the boundary between truth and narrative. They place three glasses in front of you, not drinking glasses, lenses. They say, you will not survive this library by intelligence alone. You need the right ways of seeing. They point to the first lens. Lens 1, the sentence glass. You lift it to your eyes. Suddenly you see the world not as objects, but as events. Not laws, not theories, just what is happening. A bird flaps. A drop falls. A child laughs. A pendulum swings. But each event appears with three simultaneous shadows. Because in Holophase, nothing is one-dimensional. A time shadow, a rhythm, a cadence, a pulse, omega. A space shadow, a pattern of placement, a shape of distribution, K. A motion shadow, a propagation, a drift, a change that carries the pattern, V. And behind all of them is phi, the underlying cyclic order whose derivatives cast these shadows. The librarian says, a phi sentence is not a belief. It is not a law. It is a measured pattern of phi in a licensed window, with its uncertainties included. A sentence is what reality said, not what you think it meant. You look again at the bird. You don't see bird. You see timing of wing beats, omega, spatial trajectory, k, propagation of momentum through air, v. Not as separate things, but as one tri-unity event, one phi sentence. Then the librarian says something sharp. And yes, sentences can be accurate, even when your grammar is wrong. That shocks you. You ask how. They smile. Because a wrong rule can still predict some sentences, the way a liar can still tell some truths. That is part 11.1. But you're not there yet. This is the prologue. The librarian points to the second lens. Lens 2, the grammar glass. You lift it. The world changes again. Now you don't see events. You see walls. Invisible boundaries that shape what can happen. Not walls of stone, walls of possibility. You see that the bird cannot flap at any frequency it wants. If it tries, the air stops behaving coherently. The sentence becomes unstable. You see that the drop cannot fall upward without something else changing. Not because gravity says so, but because the tri-unity constraints cannot all remain consistent at once. The librarian says, grammar is the set of constraints that make sentences cohere. Grammar is what keeps omega, k, and v from contradicting each other. Grammar is what makes reality a readable language rather than noise. And for the first time, you feel what grammar really is. Not a rule that creates reality, a constraint that prevents reality from dissolving into impossibility. That is part 11.2. The librarian points to the third lens. Lens 3, the metagrammar glass. You lift it. And now the world becomes almost unbearable. Because now you don't just see walls, you see fake walls. Walls that only exist because someone drew them on a map. Walls that only exist because an instrument has a blind spot. Walls that only exist because an inference pipeline always makes the same hidden assumption. You see entire civilizations trapped inside fake walls, worshipping them as fundamental. You see scientists building castles of explanation inside a measurement artifact. You see laws that are really conventions wearing the costume of necessity. And you understand why episode 11 exists. Because without metagrammar, science becomes mythology with equations. Metagrammar is the immune system's immune system. It does not ask, what is the law? It asks, what would count as earning the right to call something a law? That is part 11.3. And now the librarian says, welcome to the firewall. The firewall, a phenomenology of not lying. Let me bring this down to the level of your own life. You already have a metagrammar. Every human does. You use it whenever you say, that's just a coincidence. That's a pattern, but it might be overfitting. That worked once, but can it work again? Maybe my memory is biased. Maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. Metagrammar is the discipline of not lying to yourself. And episode 11 is where we turn that discipline into a civilization-grade system. Because the deeper you go into the Holophase language, the more powerful your pen becomes. When you can read phi through derivatives, you can begin to write constraints. When you can write constraints, you can engineer reality. But if your rule discovery is sloppy, you won't just be wrong. You will become a beautiful, intelligent architect of illusion. So episode 11 is the moment we stop being poets of possibility and become auditors of truth. The 5 seasons is one story. The librarian slides a map across the desk. It is labeled Episode 11, 64 Rooms of the Firewall. And the map is divided into 5 seasons. Not because of time, but because of transformation. Season 1, Foundations, Parts 1 to 16. This is where you learn what you're even doing. You learn what a phi sentence is, what grammar is, what metagrammar is. Then you learn that not all constraints are equal. Logical constraints, ontological constraints, operational constraints, empirical constraints, conventional versus canonical constraints, rule-level uncertainty and stability radii, instrument independence, representation independence. Then you learn the meta-language, how rules are written, what proof obligations they owe, how to type check them, how to publish candidate grammar families. This season is the part of the story where you stop being a tourist and become a trainee. Season 2, Inference Engine, Parts 17 to 27. This is where you learn how rules are born from sentences. How many sentences? Which ones count? How do we avoid fitting noise? You learn minimal grammar, complexity accounting, tacit assumptions, patchwise validity, scope licensing, identifiability limits, FOSSI laws, causality protocols, and intervention discipline. This season is where you stop being a believer and become a rule hunter. Season 3, Breaking Points, Parts 28 to 41. This is the season where you learn how rules die, not as failure, as purification. You learn falsifying sentences versus falsifying rules, cross-pipeline inconsistencies, regime breakdowns, misspecification diagnostics, metagates, negative controls, placebo laws, disagreement protocols, pathology detectors, inference chain robustness, out-of-distribution testing, tautology detection, and adversarial defense. This season is where you stop worshipping success and start worshipping stress. Season 4, Boundaries, Parts 42 to 46. This is where you face the unwritable, not as mystery, as an operational frontier. You learn what unwritable means in practice, how to distinguish impossibility from difficulty, how to siege test boundaries safely, how silence is information, and how negative results become sacred data rather than embarrassment. This season is where you stop demanding answers and start respecting limits. Season 5, Civilization Scale Science, Parts 47 to 64. This is where you build a system that lasts longer than any single mind. Rules persist. Rules drift. Rules get archived. Rules gain cryptographic identity. Rules accumulate lineage. Rules survive contact with alien minds. Then you reach the kernel, the minimal metagrammar that makes science possible, and the operational Gödel boundary. Any grammar strong enough to describe its own validation can never be complete without risk. Finally, you receive the license. Now cosmogenesis may begin, not as narrative, but as derivation. That is the arc. That is the meaning of episode 11. The core horror. A law can be false and still useful. Now let me tell you why this episode is philosophically and phenomenologically explosive. A law can be predictive, elegant, mathematically consistent, widely accepted, confirmed by thousands of papers, and still be wrong in its claimed universality. Not because it predicts nothing, but because it predicts for reasons that do not generalize. This is the deepest trap in science: success as camouflage. The librarian calls it the seduction of coherence. A system that coheres locally can still be false globally. A map that works inside your neighborhood can be useless across the ocean. A rule that works inside one sensor can collapse under another. A law that fits one regime can fail catastrophically outside distribution. So episode 11 teaches you to ask a new kind of question. Not, does it work, but does it survive independence? Does it survive translation? Does it survive variation? Does it survive adversarial pressure? Does it survive time? Does it survive civilization? This is metagrammar, the discipline of demanding that reality, not your preferences, be the author. The triunity heartbeat of the firewall. Now remember, in Holophase, every real claim has to carry triunity. So what does the firewall look like in triunity terms? It looks like this. Temporal firewall, omega. Does your rule survive different timescales? Does it work under different rhythms? Does it hold when the cadence changes? Some false laws are only rhythms of your instrument. Some are only rhythms of your sampling schedule. Some are only rhythms of your assumptions. Spatial firewall, K. Does your rule survive different geometries? Does it hold under different coordinate choices? Does it persist when the pattern is stretched, compressed, coarse-grained? Some false laws are only artifacts of the grid, only artifacts of the chosen basis, only artifacts of representation. Kinematic firewall. Does your rule survive different motion regimes? Does it remain coherent when observers move relative to the scene? Does it survive transformations without hidden patching? Some false laws are only true because you never changed frame. So triunity becomes an epistemic weapon. If a rule is real, it must harmonize across omega, k, and v. If it breaks in one shadow, it was never universal. And energy? Energy is the tally of how the mismatch shows up when these shadows fail to reconcile. Energy is the receipt that tells you something in the story does not add up. The listener's position. You are the firewall. Let me pull you back into the story. You are still at the desk. The library is still humming. The librarian places a folder in front of you. On the cover it says, "A proposed law." Inside is a beautiful rule written in clean notation. It fits the data, it predicts, it is elegant. And your job is to decide whether this law is real, fragile, overfit, conventional, instrument-dependent, representation-dependent, tautological, causal confusion, fossil constraint, or simply noise dressed up in math. This is the existential shift. In episode 1 to 10, we built the language of phi. We learned how to read reality as triunity echoes. We learned how science itself emerges as measurement of phi derivatives under licensed windows. Now, in episode 11, we do something harder. We build a discipline that prevents the language from becoming propaganda. Because the moment you can write reality, the first enemy is not nature. The first enemy is self-deception. The two types of failure. The librarian gives you one more teaching. There are two types of failure: the failure of a sentence and the failure of a grammar. A sentence fails when the reconstruction is wrong, the window is not licensed, the censor lied, the pipeline broke, the data is insufficient. A grammar fails when even correct sentences cannot be covered by the rule, or the rule requires patching that reveals its fragility, or it collapses outside distribution, or it is indistinguishable from a convention. This distinction will save you from superstition, because without it, every anomaly becomes either a miracle or a denial. Episode 11 creates a third option. An anomaly is a diagnostic, not a threat, a message. Why civilization needs this episode. Now I want you to feel the civilizational weight. Imagine a future humanity that can engineer matter, life, mind, and space-time. If their metagrammar is weak, they will build technologies that look stable until they cross an unseen boundary and collapse catastrophically. They will build AI systems that are aligned until the definition of alignment shifts. They will build medicine that works until it stops working outside the training population. They will build physics that predicts until it meets a regime it never tested. Episode 11 is not academic. It is survival. It is the immune system of a civilization that refuses to die by its own arrogance. The secret theme: humility as an engineering principle. People think humility is emotional. Episode 11 reveals humility as a technical principle. Humility is not, I don't know. Humility is attaching uncertainty to rules, licensing scope explicitly, archiving failure honestly, testing independence aggressively, accepting the unvitable boundary, refusing to call conventions laws, refusing to confuse correlation with causation, refusing to worship elegance. That is why episode 11 is philosophical and phenomenological, because it changes how you experience certainty. It turns certainty from a feeling into a certified status, and it turns doubt from weakness into integrity. The 68 tests as a single metaphor. You will later meet the 68 tests explicitly, but let me give you the prologue metaphor now. Imagine each proposed law must pass through a fortress with 68 gates. Each gate is a different kind of deception detector. Some gates test form, typing, assumptions, scope, identifiability, independence, causality, falsification, generalization, adversarial robustness, boundary compatibility, archiving, and lineage. A false rule can slip through a few gates, but a deeply true rule, a rule that deserves to be called law, must pass all. And if it fails, remember the heartbeat sentence. If the firewall fails, we do not believe harder, we tighten the license. The invitation. The listener becomes an auditor of reality. So here is what this prologue is doing. It is taking you, the listener, and transforming your identity. You are no longer a consumer of scientific claims. You are becoming something rarer, a guardian of epistemic legitimacy. A person who can hear a claim and ask, what is the scope object? Where is the uncertainty object? Which windows licensed this? Which instruments confirmed it? Which representations were rotated? What negative controls were run? What would falsify it? Does it survive out of distribution? Is it tautological? Is it causal or correlational? Is it a fossil constraint? Where is it archived? What is its lineage? That is episode 11. And if you learn this skill, then something profound happens. You become someone who cannot be manipulated by beautiful lies. Not because you are cynical, because you are trained. Bridge into Season 1. Now the librarian closes the folder. They take back the pen, for now. They say, before you can write rules, you must learn what a sentence is. Then you must learn what grammar is. Then you must learn what metagrammar is. We start small, because your discipline must be stronger than your imagination. They stand and point down a corridor. On the archway it says, Season 1, The Foundations. The Architecture of Constraint Itself. And the first door is labeled 11.1, What a Fee Sentence Is. The librarian turns to you one last time and says, reality speaks in sentences. Your job is to learn when you truly heard one, and when you only heard your own echo. Salam and peace be upon you.